assuming tomorrow all of Europe, starting from the EU and trickling downwards, were to enact the perfect immigration policy with making maximum effort to alleviate tensions building up in society, what do you think is the likelihood that Europe is still able to unavoid major civil unrest over the next, say, 30 years?
That's a very difficult question, because one of the things in this which is so hard is making predictions. For instance, take what one might think of as a tipping point argument. There's always this argument in this in politics, what is the tipping point for a certain thing? And I would say, well, whatever people say might be a tipping point tends not to be. So, for instance, the death of 22 girls in one night in Manchester turns out not to be that much of a tipping point. I would have thought that Cologne on New Year's Eve 2015 would have been a tipping point, but it wasn't particularly. The murder of one young girl who happened to turn out to be Jewish in Bavaria a few months ago by an Iraqi asylum seeker was something of a tipping point in Germany. But that's an example of what I say, the futility of predictions. You would have thought the mass groping and rape of hundreds of women in one night in Cologne would have a bigger effect than that, but it turns out, no, it's understandably for all sorts of historical and local reasons. One schoolgirl is brutally raped and murdered, and that changes things. But you don't know how much it's going to change things, and you don't know the extent to which the public anger can be dampened, and so on and so forth. So it's very hard to make predictions for that reason, and particularly to see where things change. My own view is that there are very obvious things which each of the European nations could do, which I lay out at the end of the book, even now to address this. But broadly speaking, we've got trouble anyway, because, again, a country like my own, it just is going to keep having these social issues because of the things I outline. And you could stop all immigration tomorrow, which I'm not myself completely in favor of. But you could stop all immigration tomorrow and you'd still have that issue. And that's because we haven't been able to answer that very fundamental issue of why we pretend that everyone from anywhere in the world who walks into our country becomes exactly like everyone else by breathing the air of that country. We haven't thought that bit through at all. And so we're going to live with that for a very long time. And by the way, all opinion polls across Europe keep on showing a very interesting trend on that, which even the level down from the security question, the social attitudes question, they keep showing that areas of, as it were, more diversity are less tolerant. That's a fascinating, I give some of the stats of that in my book. It's a fascinating thing. I just discovered an example of that, by the way, in Australia, where they had a gay marriage referendum recently, and the press looked into which areas were more pro-gay marriage than others, and it turned out that one of the least pro-gay marriage areas was the west of Sydney, which is the largest Muslim immigration area, and then the press just stopped looking. We're hoping we would find some like Bushmen who just turned out to be terrible, terrible backward people on that question. You know? So we have trouble anyway, is the answer.